Right. Well, many thanks, Phil, and good morning to everyone. Another chilly start to the day, some sub-freezing temperatures up north. We'll talk more, but that's a continuing theme here, at least for the next several days. But I want to start here looking at the last week, and depending on where you were, our mean temperatures range from a degree or two below normal in far northern parts of the state to about 2, 3, even 4 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. That was especially true as you got down towards the southern boundary or border of the state with Indiana and Ohio, with some fairly warm weather, some almost early summer-like weather here over the weekend, a rapid rise in temperature. The longer-term story that we've been covering, of course, regards dryness and precipitation for at least for some parts of the state. On the right-hand side here are weekly rainfall totals, precipitation totals, I should still say at this time of the year, and they were highly variable. We did have some very significant rains across northern parts of lower Michigan, some cases more than 2 inches, but there were also areas of the state, notably here, the central and portions of the southern lower, where we got less than 1/4 of an inch, and that of course continues a pattern or a trend of drier than normal conditions that, depending on location, go back minimum of several weeks, some cases much longer than that. And we do have long-term moisture deficits in those areas. We seem to have been stuck in this pattern. And just really briefly, and you probably have seen this if you watch the radar and watch what looks to be or appears to be promising weather systems approaching Michigan. And we have 2 branches of the jet stream we have had for the last several weeks. The northern branch has led to some precipitation in the northern part of the state, especially the Upper Peninsula. They're actually even a little ahead of normal in terms of precip. Also, a number of systems, and this is the one here locally for us in the East Lansing area. The southern branch of the jet stream has led to a number of systems that have just missed us to the south, including last weekend and the week before that, and probably, I hate to even say it, but probably here early next week with another system coming out again out of the south that will probably just miss most of the state to the south. And that's been a pattern resulting in this, again, area of Michigan, especially the central and southern lower, that has just been repeatedly missed, at least recently. Now I'll talk about that here in just a second. In terms of our degree day accumulations, and this is the last one, we'll look at March totals. So this goes back to the beginning of the month of March through Tuesday. And we can see that we still have surpluses in most of the state in terms of our thermal time or our heat accumulation as of the early part of the season. But it's less true than it was here a couple weeks ago. There are some spots in the Upper Peninsula and the far northern lower that are pretty close to normal, or where they should be in terms of calendar days and time right now. And the surplus increases as you go south. And you can see that here on the right-hand side. So the surplus in general ranges from almost none or no surplus to a 7 to perhaps as many as 10 days in the far southeastern part of the state. So we're still ahead, but not as much as we were 2 or 3 weeks ago, given the, again, recent temperature departures. Soil temperatures have increased over the last week a little bit. And over Michigan here, these are average 2-inch bare soil temperatures. And of course, awful lot of planting going on these days, but they range currently now, the averages from the upper 40s across upper Michigan to the low 50s in the northern lower to the upper 50s across the far south. So again, they've come a ways, and obviously with the drier conditions especially has allowed a great deal of field work and planting to take place here recently. Moving or shifting gears here to precipitation and talking about water, I've already mentioned this, but April, we look at the month as a whole, was another drier than normal month for at least for the lower peninsula. It was actually wetter than normal across the upper peninsula. These are rankings of the precipitation totals, 1 through 129, with 1 being the wettest and 129 being the driest. And you can see again that it was wetter than normal in the north, but across the lower peninsula, especially the southern half, we've got rankings up above 110, which indicates that April was statistically amongst probably the 20% driest Aprils on record. And again, that followed a drier than normal March, and in some cases even drier than normal winter conditions as well. So those deficits there still continue. A couple of images here taken from NASA, and these are collective soil moisture indices, but I think they're fairly telling. The one on the upper right-hand side here gives us, for the top approximately 3 feet of the soil profile, this is the percent of plant available moisture. So it's what the plants can extract out of that soil depth. And you can see that the greens here, we're actually doing really well up in the northern part of the state, not surprisingly given the rainfall totals that they've had there. But for the southern, let's say half or 2/3 of the state, almost, lots of browns and oranges, indicating levels here down below half of what is typically there or could be available there. And if we look at this in terms of a typical soil for about a 3-foot profile, medium textured soil, maybe we could have about 5 inches of plant available water in that volume. What this is suggesting is that now we've only got about maybe 2.5, 2 inches. So we've got deficits here on the order of 2 to maybe as much as 4 inches of plant available water. The issue with this is timing is so important here. And so this would be one thing if we were talking about late July, when we typically see some of the driest soils during the whole annual cycle, but we're at the very, very beginning. So of course the impacts right now are relatively minor, but going into the season in Michigan, we typically almost have values of soil moisture, stored soil moisture, that are significantly greater than this. The image on the bottom right-hand side here are actually rankings. It only goes back to 2010, so there's only about 20 years in this data set, but still indicates that conditions right now are among the driest we've seen in the last 20 years, at least again in this southern part of the state. So it is something that is a concern. And also I guess reminds us that we will need at least normal rainfall here as the season progresses, because some of that moisture, which we typically rely on later on in July and August, later on in the season, will not be there because, again, we've had these dry conditions early. So it's a longer term issue, and it won't go away short term either, or very, very unlikely that it'll happen. So something we'll continue to monitor. Lastly here, the Drought Monitor, most recent issue here last week, there'll be another one here this morning, really moved Michigan towards the negative here, up to now 57% of the state in the D1 moderate drought category. That's a huge change from the previous week and from a couple weeks ago. So something we'll be watching. Obviously, other people see this as well. There also are problems with dryness. You can see certainly the most acute in our part of the world, the north central, or up in the northern plains. That's where conditions are worse. But the Great Lakes has certainly deteriorated in terms of the moisture situation here over the last several weeks. On the weather map this morning, and Phil already made mention of this, we do have some moisture on the way, but we've got actually 2 weather systems in the near future. But as has been the case, these are out of that northern branch of the jet stream, and the moisture with these is very limited. So we're not expecting anything heavy. It will be certainly useful, but most areas that see rainfall, down here you can see in the radar pic here as of 20 till the hour, it is just entering the western side of Michigan. This weather system here, it's a little ripple of low pressure. It will be mostly a sort of a steady light rain or occasional light rain. There will be enough cold air aloft in northern parts of the state that we could see some mixing with snow at times, or even a changeover, especially as we get towards this evening. So don't be surprised about that. Again, unseasonably cool weather right now, and that's going to continue. But most areas with this don't expect anything heavy. It probably will be on the order of 1 to 2 tenths. Some spots might pick up to about 1/4 of an inch, but that's about it. By this evening, you can see that system moves here to the center to northwest Ohio, and the threat for rain ends from west to east. Most areas will see, the western side of the state will see this precip here during the morning and into the afternoon, and then shift that a few hours as we go eastward, so the middle of the day to the early evening before all comes to an end. The next weather system, remember the system number 2 that I talked about, it's this cold front here, moving down from Canada, and there's cold air behind there. More another reinforcing shot of of cold air comes behind that. By tomorrow morning, you can see that then moving into the lower peninsula with another chance for mainly scattered showers. And again, the colors change here. That reflects the chance for freezing precipitation, certainly some snow mixed in. But this, like today, light amounts, a tenth or two of an inch at best. So we're not looking at anything heavy, but it would be enough certainly to stop or prevent field operations in most cases. But again, mostly a steady light rain. The good news is most of it will fall in that orderly fashion and be able to soak in, especially in areas that have been able to plant. By Saturday morning here, high pressure moves in. We will have unseasonably cold or cool conditions continuing. And then the next weather system of note here is forming out over the Great Plains. At the current time, it looks as though we will see nicer, fair and dry conditions here in the state on Friday and into Saturday. This system, just like many of the other ones, though, or like many of the other systems we've seen the last several weeks, may clip the far southern part of the state, but most of the state will remain dry, probably through the early part of next week. So after this particular system goes by on Sunday, that would be the greatest threat of any rain in the far south. We'll probably won't see any threat or chance of rain until the middle of next week. And next week is looking actually fairly dry as well. So you can see a theme here: cool and dry certainly is the direction that we're in. With this, well, more than one Canadian air mass over the region, there's going to be a continuing threat for frost and freezing temperatures. We see some sub-freezing temperatures up in upper Michigan here this morning as we speak. That's going to continue on an almost daily basis. A lot of it will depend on where you are. There will be greater threat in interior areas of the state. And one of the other things to watch too is whenever it clears off or calms down, the wind calms down in the overnight hours, that's when the threat is going to be greatest, because there's a lot going on right now with the weather pattern, sort of an unsettled type of weather pattern. And anytime we have clouds or wind, like we did in many parts of the state last night, it will prevent the surface temperatures from falling below freezing. We'll typically see maybe mid or upper 30s, and that was the case across much of the central and southern lower here this morning. So this is, while this is not a threat of a really severe hard freeze like what we saw back in late April, it's going to be a sort of a continuing nagging threat where we might, in some cases, we might reach the upper 20s, but more likely most areas will be in the low 30s or maybe even a little higher than that. The graphic here shows it forecasts minimum temperatures on Saturday morning here. And again, you can see most of those are in the upper 20s or low 30s. Right now, it's a little hard. This, my guess would be, this might be the coldest morning, but there will be a continuing threat even beyond Saturday into Sunday and even Monday and Tuesday of next week. But most of the greatest threat will be in northern parts of the state and interior areas away from the lakes. In terms of precipitation, I mentioned drier than normal, and you can see that very well illustrated here. This is the 7-day precip outlook. The vast majority of precip, like it has been over the last several weeks, is expected south of us over the Ohio and mid-Mississippi valleys. In Michigan, most areas a quarter of an inch or less. So definitely drier than normal, and a little bit more of the same. On the positive side, with the cool temperatures expected, our PET rates will also be much less than they typically are. So the water needs or demands won't be there. But hopefully with a little bit of this rain that we have here, it will be enough to moisten soils, maybe even to ultimately, when the soils warm up, to allow germination to occur or activate herbicides. There's a number of issues there. We have dry soils, dry topsoils in many parts of the state, and that will likely be a continuing challenge. In the medium range forecast guidance, there are still some directions here. The 6 to 10 day outlook is calling for essentially a continuation of where we are now, and that's cooler and drier than normal. The mean temperature forecast in the upper right, precipitation in the lower right here. And I think this is a fairly good bet. There are some questions about how long does this pattern last, this particular jet stream pattern. Most of the guidance is suggesting moderation. And we might see, while we're only expecting high temperatures here over the next several days, even still some upper 40s north to 50s in the south, and then lows in the 30s or even some 20s in some areas. We should see 60s once again a little more consistently by the middle of next week, but a fairly extended, cooler than normal pattern. The 8 to 14 day outlook is somewhat similar to this, but it does call for temperatures to increase back to near normal levels. It also calls for precip to increase to above normal levels, but the caveat is there's uncertainty, there's model disagreement. I would not certainly sell or write that one in as an ink just yet. There's still things happening, and there tends to be some continuity with some of these types of patterns. I wouldn't be surprised if this cooler than normal pattern lasted beyond the middle of May. There was one change from the NOAA's Climate Prediction Center regarding our outlook for May, and it's directly because of the median range guidance you just saw. It had been calling for near to above normal mean temperatures and above normal precip for the month of May. That has been changed at the revision here at the end of the month, last Friday. They now are calling for a near to below normal mean temperatures and near to above normal precip still, but that's a pretty significant change from the earlier version of it from the third week of April. But it reflects again the pattern that we're in right now, and most of that weather, at least the cooler than normal weather, is early in the month. We have yet to see that wetter than normal pattern really establish itself, and again, that's going to be at least until the third week, if at all. So I'll wrap up here. Basically cool and unsettled certainly for the next couple of days. We do have some rain, but it will be limited. And then for most of the state, we'll be looking at a fair and cool weekend and into early next week with this particular pattern. Keep an eye. The frost freeze risk will continue on an almost daily basis, especially north and inland. And the medium range suggests gradually more of the same, but a gradual improvement. And I'll wrap up with that and then move to introduce our speaker for next week. Next Thursday will be Dr. Aaron Burns, who's our weed extension specialist here on campus at MSU. And Aaron's going to be talking about post-emergent weed control. And assuming we can get some warmer temperatures here, we will have hopefully some post-emergence for our crops to talk about, but don't miss that. And again, that's a week from today. So I'll turn it back over to Phil.